I don't know.
It is. It is now recording.
Okay.
We are now doing the recording thing.
So now we got to do a show.
I guess we can do said show.
All right. Let's go.
What has the IRC not been full frame? It's been full frame.
Full frame. Hey Chase, could you make sure the hey there, hey Chase?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
we just got a note here from production, and they're just
yes,
hey Chase.
Yes,
they're just wondering if maybe you could check on the IRC frame, and also they're wondering why you haven't fixed it already.
No.
Why didn't you catch this sooner before we went on air? What's that?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Does it look?
I'm sorry.
Does it look too good? Does it look too good? Is the production value too high? I apologize.
I'm not going to dignify that with an answer.
Exactly. All right. Well, neither am I. All right. Wait. By the way, I need to cheat again. This is what is this? Episode 287. Okay, 287. All right. Here we go. And it begins in a 3, and a 2, and a 1. Hold on.
We may need some faith healers.
Sorry. I had on the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. They're going to take this from the top.
That's what she said.
Actually, I needed to turn up the volume. Oh! Forgot to do that. All right, here we go. This is episode 287 of the Unfilter program. It begins in 3, 2, 1. This is Unfilter, episode 287, recorded on Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. That's right, it's a special intro. And once again, it's time for Unfilter Roadshow Edition, episode 287, coming to you here on Wednesday, July 18th. And I'm Chase, and I think you will hear the other voice coming from a distant, far-off land. I think the land of the Midwest somewhere. I think it's hot and warm. Chris Fisher! Chris, what's up, buddy?
Hey, buddy. Oh, just hanging out in 106-degree weather. Roasting and podcasting. I was going to try to rhyme that, but I couldn't come up with anything. Sorry, I put no effort into my intro.
Well, that's the only thing that if that's the only thing you've put no effort into, I think that's a positive.
You know what? I promise to make it up for the rest of the show. I mean, when we just had Peter Strzok doing his testimony, we had plenty of show, and that was before the Trump-Putin summit, the indictments of Bob's Dozen, and, of course, a high note, as always. This is a packed Roadshow edition. So, buddy, thanks for taking the reins at your studio there back in Washington, so that way, even though I'm on the road, we can do a video version of the show. So I'm on the remote connection this week, and Chase is there running the board, playing the clips.
That's right, live from the Geek Gamer TV studios. Which, by the way, patrons, we love you guys, and I personally want to say here at the top of the show, and I know we give them all the love usually in the overtime. The patrons, the patrons over at patreon.com/unfilter, the ones that heard your call.
You mean the show isn't sponsored by GoDaddy? I thought.
No. That's that other like Linux type show. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm on a Mac right now, but anyway, and PC. But yes, thank you for all the patrons. A lot of you guys said, hey, what happened to video last week? And we wanted to bring you guys a show. So like crucially, we wanted to make sure we brought you one. And then we're like, where's the video? And so it's like, hey, we can do this. We'll do it. And here we are, Video Roadshow Edition.
Never happy. Those patrons.
never happy.
I tease. They're always making us set the bar high, buddy.
No, they're great. They're awesome.
So everything has a bit of a theme this week, even our cyber segment. So let's kick things off with the cyber. Intel chief Dan Coates sat down for some testimony and said the cyber is worse than it's ever been, and Russia is the most aggressive of the cyber offenders.
Oh.
The director of national intelligence, Dan Coates, warned yesterday of the intensifying threat of cyber attacks against the U.S. He called Russia the most aggressive offender. Tonight, Elizabeth Palmer shows us what's being done to crack down on foreign cyber invaders.
Crack down.
If you don't like what your critics say, insult them.
Ben Nimmo is a cyber investigator for the DC-based Atlantic Council.
Who here has been insulted by the Russian propaganda machine already?
With the U.S. midterms approaching, he's teaching these activists and social media experts how to detect and expose Russian disinformation online.
Okay, let's pause there.
Okay.
So that organization that he's from, the Atlantic Organization, is a very, very strong trade organization that really is all about trading between the U.S. and Europe and really squeezing Russia out. That's one of their biggest focuses in life. So that's an interesting pick to then go lead this summit. And so everybody there has been abused by the Russian propaganda machine. And this is setting us up to understand that Russia is the biggest cyber aggressor out there. I
was going to say this feels like a weird kind of like get together.
Yeah,
a specifically targeted towards one country.
I would like to say, are we all in agreement? All of the quote unquote stakeholders and observers, are we all in agreement that trolling somebody on Twitter is a cyber attack? And are we all comfortable with saying that spam email and phishing emails are cyber attacks?
It's a slippery slope, as they say.
Yeah, man. That's like next step up is cookies. Like cookies that track where you go are a cyber attack. People that monitor you on Facebook and watch the shit that you publicly post are now cyber stalkers, and they are people like a supposedly intelligence agencies that are scooping all this up, and it's all cyber spying all of a sudden.
Right.
It's like things are really getting amped up, and if you listen to the dialogue these people are having, the issues they're talking about. See, when I think of a cyber attack, I think of somebody who owns a box on my network and then island hops around my network and gets root access and starts collecting information and extracting data.
That's an attack. Absolutely.
That's a cyber attack.
Now, but to be fair, I mean, I believe, though, like, trolling can go over a line. Like, you and I, and we've seen people lightly troll us all the time, in comments or feedback and that sort of thing. But if you're, like, getting constantly harassed and, like, you're, like, to the level of, like, actually feeling fearful.
So call that cyber harassment,
cyber
bullying.
Yeah, that's
call
true.
That whatever,
yeah,
but
you're right.
But cyber attack, it's
yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
All right. Continue on.
Continuing.
These activists and social media experts how to detect and expose Russian disinformation online.
Could be that has been partially modified, but
We know that elections are always a big, juicy target.
The aim is to head off the kind of Russian meddling that tainted America's 2016 presidential campaign. But with the midterm primaries already underway, Nimmo agrees with U.S. intelligence that Russian trolls and bots, those are automated fake accounts, are preparing a flood of toxic and divisive disinformation aimed
Now, that I actually believe. I mean, but it's not just Russia. I mean, a lot of competing factions, but yes.
Yeah. Of course, China, I bet, different interest groups within the U.S., crazy sons of bitches within the U.S. that are doing this. And it'll all be completely ineffective and a waste of their money. Just like all of the ads that Russia bought, or groups connected with Russia bought on Facebook starting back in 2014, 2015, and then into the election. In fact, if you look at what the investigators found, they stopped buying ads towards the later run of the presidential campaign. In fact, they've been buying more ads post-election than they were during the latter half summer area of the election. They bought more ads leading up to the election about divisive topics and not about presidential candidates than they did during the actual election, and they got no traction. Their accounts have no followers. They had very little engagement. They've spent pennies in comparison to what other candidates spent, and it did really, by all accounts, no moving of any needle. You can point to crazy memes and pictures and stupid ads that rile up racial issues, but you cannot point to any conclusive evidence that shows it had any effectiveness at all. And the reality is, as somebody who's bought ads and experimented with ads on Facebook for years and haven't done it for about 6-7 months, I can tell you that the numbers you do get are inflated. You know, if you have like a video ad, if you're scrolling through your Facebook feed and that video plays, even if it's just for a few seconds with the audio muted, they count that as an ad view. Like, these numbers are super unreliable because they're within the platform's best interest, in this case Facebook, to make them look good to the people buying ads. But they're not really all that effective. We all know that. Anybody that's been on the internet for a while knows that. We know these ads suck. All of these targeted ads, they suck, regardless of the millions of dollars these companies spend to build these systems. They suck.
Yeah,
well, and I don't buy for a moment that this toxic information that these bots are preparing to automatically unleash on the internet is going to make a hill of beans different. It's not going to have any impact at all.
Well, I don't know.
It's not a cyber attack.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say zero. I wouldn't say absolutely zero impact. I think there'll be like the annoyance impact, and then there'll be, the echo chamber impact, if you will. But I wouldn't say
probably zero impact is not fair. You may affect, a couple 100,000 people. You may influence a couple 100,000 people a little bit in the way they think.
But it really does
for most.
But it can offer inflammatory and kind of sometimes keep the machine rolling, if that makes any sense. Like, sometimes someone can take a meme or they can take an ad and they take something and it just helps keeps things stirred up.
That's what I was gonna say. I was just gonna say a little differently. A lot of what this stuff does is it serves people's confirmation bias machine.
Yeah,
people that are out there looking for stuff that reaffirms what they already believe, and I think that's where this stuff has a more effective role. But these are people that are already lost causes. Let's be honest.
Yeah, true.
All right, a little more.
All right, a little more.
Squarely at U.S. voters.
You'll see lots of push on gun control, on immigration, race relations.
All the hot issues.
All the hot issues. Supreme Court now, I would expect to see attacks.
We agreed not to reveal where Ben Nimmo lives and works because hunting down Russian hackers and trolls is dangerous business, and he has received death threats.
And it got quite vicious.
They even sent a fake obituary to all his contacts.
They've tweeted the message that I'm dead.
And it's social.
All right, that's messed up, man. I'm sorry, but I mean, just the paperwork that you have to do to clear that stuff up. But no, seriously. That's not cool. That's not cool.
Media giant.
Yeah, not good.
And like Facebook and Twitter are trying to shut down Russian fake accounts too.
There it's called Rachel Newman.
Yeah.
And that one's called Jessica Bauer.
And so is U.S. intelligence, but they are simply overwhelmed. Concrete proof? Nimmo has just exposed a huge Russian bot network lurking online. So well disguised and pushing porn, it even fooled Twitter's new filters. All it would take is a single call from the Kremlin to sick it on.
It's so good, it even fooled Twitter.
Okay, so the one thing that I have to just mention is bots are not anything more than scriptable actions that you really have, like automated scripts, really. Think about it. I mean, I'm trying to make it sound as simple as possible because these are not advanced thinking, moving. At best, they take remote commands and they can do limited tasks. And a bot is the way they're using a bot, it's a rough definition of the term. Like, it's the way Slack uses a bot, where if I make a new Google Doc, a Google Docs bot in Slack automatically grabs that URL and pastes that URL into a dedicated chat room of all of the Google Docs that have been created. That is technically a bot. Really, it's just automating an action. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about taking a picture of some tits and automatically posting it on Twitter. But it sounds way more sophisticated if you call it a bot, and then you call a bunch of them doing it a botnet. Then all of a sudden we have a sophisticated software operation that's using automated thinkers in the web. But that's not what we have here. You have one piece of software using an API to talk to another piece of software.
Yep.
That's what's happening.
Yep.
So I agree, it's bad, it's abusive, it's bullying, if you even want to label it that way. It's not a sophisticated cyber attack, though. That's not what we're dealing with.
No, not to that kind of high level. No, not here. Not when you're dealing with Twitter and an Instagram and, you know, that seems like child's play in comparison to some of the bigger stuff we've talked about in this segment.
Is there much more on this clip?
No, not really. I mean, there's about 10 seconds if you want me to finish it off.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. All right. I know there's a Peter I want to talk about, though.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Peter. Man, were we waiting for Peter. So
Peter.
He's the FBI agent who is involved in investigating Hillary Clinton's email. He was involved and beginning to be involved with investigating Russia collusion. He was on Bob's team until he got removed for bias. And it was a massive story. If he was going to show up, will he show up? We talked about it a little bit last week. Well, he showed up. And what a shit show it was. So let's frame it a little bit. Let's play a couple of minutes here, maybe not even that much. Let's play a few here from this Wolf Blitzer clip where they sort of give us the context of this hearing.
Let's go to the sit room.
The texts between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, they are so damning.
They are, Wolf, which is why what Gloria is laying out here, yes, that is Strzok's mission today, is try to walk this line of, I have personal political views, it didn't impact my work at all. That may be true, but when he says that those texts, quote, not indicative of bias, that's just flat wrong on its face. It is indicative of bias. I understand his point is, well,
he makes the case, and I think he's right. I think his assessment there is right, and we can move on from that.
All right.
What he's essentially saying is that Peter Strzok's mission was to convince the world that he wasn't biased, that somehow those text messages between him and his lover didn't show bias. And that was the first thing that Trey Gowdy tried to go after him for, and it was abrupt and in his face. It was full Gowdy mode.
Your testimony is Bob Mueller did not kick you off because of the content of your text. He kicked you off because of some appearance that he was worried about.
Sure. My testimony, what you asked and what I responded to, was that he kicked me off because of my bias. I'm stating to you it is not my understanding that he kicked me off because of any bias, that it was done based on the appearance. If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI
I love that line.
With an
That's my favorite line.
I know. I mean, I agree.
Don't give a damn what you appreciate.
I don't care. You know, obviously.
Here, I know you want to defend this guy, but let me, before you do it, just say this. This guy is an FBI agent.
Yes.
And he has tarnished the reputation. I mean, it's not that I held the FBI in super high regard, but what this guy did was came out and confirmed a lot of my biases about the FBI, that they're political hacks,
right,
that are trying to make political moves inside, that they're incompetent, they're having affairs with each other. Like, it is really bad, as your buddy Obama says, optics for that entire department. And then when you combine on top of that the shit show and leaker that was James Comey and Tarmac meeting Loretta Lynch, if I can get these words out, Tarmac meeting Loretta Lynch with Bill Clinton, who was completely biased in the investigation. Like, when you add all of that together, it casts so much doubt over the Justice Department and the FBI minions that this is shameful. What he has exposed is shameful. And everyone, even tangentially related in the FBI, should be fired, because it's bad optics and it doesn't look good for what is supposed to be the center of our justice system. So I think when you hear Gowdy upset, remember that before he sat here, he was a prosecutor, and he has been recently on record saying that the most important thing he did in his life was work for the legal system, and the hardest thing he's done is be a politician. He has a great respect for the legal system, and I think he is offended because he is from that system. He is offended by the damage he's done. So I think that's where Gowdy's coming from.
So first off, I'm not trying to defend anybody here. I just try to look at all the potential different angles. Now, I will say that I agree with the majority of what you say there. Obviously, you know, Peter, while he was making a private text message to his, you know, what would you call it, his muse, his adulteress or lover, or whatever.
But I do feel like you got to give some context to that. You know, you know, maybe you're putting on a brave face, that kind of stuff.
And, you know, it's one of those situations where, you know, I'm inclined to believe and give him a little shadow of a doubt that, yeah, he was having a private conversation. But that being said, he should know more than anybody that when you're involved in such a high-profile investigation, every little thing will be not only magnified and analyzed, but you have to...
Especially at this day and age.
Right. And even if you say, hey, I am not biased. And, let's say you are being 100% truthful and you are laying it all out there that, hey, I'm venting to my lover, but, I can keep those opinions separate and that sort of thing. It's all about optics. And when you go out there, and that's why Mueller removed him immediately, because he knows.
Why, that's Gowdy's point here. Gowdy's point is Mueller says there's bias. But the other thing too is just one bit of irony. The reason we even have these text messages to begin with is because they were not on his personal phone. He was given the privilege of going through his personal phone and deciding which ones should be handed over to the FBI and doing it on his own volition. These ones he didn't have any choice to hand over because they messaged on their work systems because they were trying to keep it from their spouses who they were both cheating on. So if they weren't cheaters, they wouldn't have had to been messaging on their work systems, and we wouldn't have all of these transcripts.
Right.
So Gowdy is getting on his case here because Peter Strzok, the entire time he's here, just like CNN said, is he's trying to say he wasn't biased. He's trying to say, I hated this man. I was trying to create an insurance policy. I said him winning the presidency would be a disaster for the country. I said all those things, but they don't affect my thought process. That's the case he's trying to make, and Gowdy isn't having it.
Right.
Let's continue on.
More Gowdy mode activated.
Level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016. In addition to disappointing the hell out of my Democrat colleagues, that someone who was investigating Russian collusion didn't think there was any there, why would you be concerned? Why would you not be ecstatic that there was no collusion? Why the word concern?
Sir, I don't know what I meant.
All right, that was more of the fireworks at today's...
All right, pause there. So Relectrant in the chat room is asking a story, and I want to play a mental game here for a moment. We're done with that clip.
All right.
I want to play a mental game just as an exercise. What if these were not lovers at all? What if Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were not lovers? And in fact, if you look at the transcripts, there's nothing in there about like, oh, I miss your dick, or oh, I love you, or
No, they did those over phone calls, actually.
So what if does it change your perception if they're not lovers at all? If the lovers thing, as Reluctant in the chat room is suggesting, are cover stories to lessen the blow of this. And in fact, they were an FBI lawyer and a high-level FBI agent conspiring together. Because, and the reason why I bring that up is there is a text message where they talk about openly discussing creating an insurance policy against Trump winning in somebody else's office, in another high-level FBI person's office. And the language that Lisa Page uses, I like that idea you threw out in so-and-so's office, as in multiple people were sitting in a room talking about this. And that's in the transcript.
Yeah.
So if you remove this cover story, which there's not a lot of evidence that they're actually lovers, if you remove that cover story, then all of a sudden it's much more damning. Like it's, holy shit, these are 2 plotting FBI agents, probably more. Plus you got Comey leaking constantly. This is really looking bad now. Like, I hope they are lovers, because that then at least gives you context where Peter is maybe trying to be a tough guy. But it's almost a little misogynist for us all to assume that they must be lovers because she's a woman and he's a man. And the misogynist in all of us, like, I think there's an inherent bias where we just go, speaking of bias, I think this is exactly how bias works. That's why I like talking about this. There's a bias where we go, oh, yeah, of course, she's kind of good looking. They're going to fuck. Yeah, that's how these things work. But in reality, she could be a strong, independent woman who had no interest in his dick at all, but didn't want Trump to win. But when this story starts coming out, to mitigate the level of outrage and damage that would be done to the FBI's reputation, you spin it with the lover story.
And that's where I'm having issue, because I feel like there's not a lot of, well, first off, there's a lot of conjecture, right? And a lot of, well, if you go down the path to say, hey, if they're not lovers, there's a lot of pieces that fit that puzzle, right? And, well, if they are lovers, there's a plausible explanation, right? And so,
but it does suggest they're deceptive liars too,
right? And that's what I was going to say is either way, you know, it's hard to say, well, I'm going to trust you, even though you're breaking trust in other areas, right? You know, relationships, you know, families, you know, things like that.
That's kind of a. I mean, I feel like kind of shitty for saying that because it's kind of like it's maybe. You know, everybody has their own situation, but Gomer kind of made a play for that. Didn't go over super well.
Yeah, but, I know where you're going, but yeah, we'll play it and then we'll talk.
Yeah, and you have come in here and said, "I had no bias," and you do it with a straight face. And I watched you in the private testimony you gave, and I told some of the other guys, he is really good. He's lying. He knows. We know he's lying. And he could probably pass a polygraph. It's amazing.
Mr. Chairman.
No, this is my
Mr.
time.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Point of order. This point of order.
No.
The gentleman will state his point of order.
A member of this committee just asserted that this witness, who is under oath and a former agent of the FBI, lied. There is no evidence that. I ask him to withdraw it.
I do not withdraw it. He is not a member of Congress. It's not a violation of the rule. And just as you have been expressing bias through your members about what a hero
there is not a single person on this committee who has ever characterized a witness
gentleman
as
from
lying.
Rhode Island.
Gentlemen, it's my time.
That's a disgrace.
Gentleman from Rhode Island will suspend.
No, you'll suspend.
Isn't that a shit show?
You know what? I was watching this live. It was on in the background, and I kept going back to it. I'm just like, no wonder why everybody hates Congress. I think it might have been.
Nobody was trying to get to the truth. Really, they're all trying to fight for their tribe.
Right, and you know, I maybe it was you and I were talking about this because I think we were kind of keeping an eye on us during.
We were chatting live while it was going.
And I mean, it's like no wonder why Congress has a 20% approval rating. No wonder everybody wants to win points for their side. And honestly, all I want, and I think what everybody wants, is just truth. You know, it's like, come on.
Did you hear the dig in there about the polygraph thing?
Yeah, he'll probably, yeah.
Yeah, did you catch the part of the testimony where they talk about him? So there's this, I think it was Ohio, I can't remember where, I should have grabbed the clip of it now that I think about it, but there's a senator, might have been Idaho, I apologize, I didn't plan on talking about this, but he's been following this polygraph thing now for 3 hearings or so. I've been watching him ask the different people involved different questions about this polygraph situation. And Peter Strzok had a polygraph where he was, I forget the exact term they use, but it's essentially it's like out of bounds. It's like it's not like a full fail, but you had some anomalous readings that we would consider a fail, but you're a really important person. So what we do is we say you're out of bounds, but you can take another polygraph, and if you pass that one, you'll be okay. And he did. So he failed and then took another one and passed. Now, the irony is the moment he fails, he should have been pulled out of the Mueller investigation. And if he would have gotten pulled because of the failure back in January, none of this would have come to light either. None of this would have been an issue. He wouldn't have gotten on the team. He wouldn't have gotten kicked off. The text messages wouldn't have come out.
Right.
None of that would have happened if they would have followed their own procedures when he went out of bounds on the polygraph. But the way the system works is like you're supposed to have your credentials revoked, but you can stay in, but you just don't get classified credentials.
Right. You get knocked down to another level, basically.
Yeah. But what he did instead is he took another polygraph and he passed that one. So when Gomer says you can lie and pass a polygraph, that's what he's referring to. It's like a little inside reference there. Now, I do want to play a piece that's going to get us pulled off of YouTube, but this is just a great moment where you and I were going like, wow, this is really the moment where I realized nobody wants anybody to win. They all just want to fight. And there is a theme. Like when the Republican side of the questioners would start to kind of get to something that would maybe be a little questionable and kind of throw Peter off his game, he generally had a Democrat swoop in and sort of block the whole thing with some sort of procedure, some sort of parliamentary procedure. Here's some highlights of that.
All right.
You are under subpoena and are required to answer the question. Are you objecting to the question? If so, please state your objection.
Mr. Chairman, I object.
The gentleman it does not have standing to object. There is no
point of order.
No point of order here.
So the hearing turned into a big shouting match.
Do you understand that?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The question is directed to the witness.
And I have a point of order before he answers the question.
The point of order is not well taken until...
You don't know what the point of order is. You can't say it's not well taken.
The point of order, the witness will...
By the way, notice Mr. Goodlotti here. They don't even look at each other. They're sitting next to each other, right?
So awkward, man.
But they're not even looking at each other. It's like, have you ever, I mean, you got kids, man. So, I mean, you ever had a situation where maybe one of your kids was yelling, but they don't yell at you directly? Like they're yelling, but not.
It's actually, it's more like that than you know, because later on, like I think in this clip too, if you watch, like when other people are talking, they're leaning over and whispering to each other. They're whispering back and forth to each other. They're talking and looking at each other then. It's funny.
It's weird.
Answer the question.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Let me continue.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Point of order. I believe there's a point of order that's been raised.
The gentleman has not stated a valid point of order.
The ruling of the chair in that case.
Nonetheless,
are you just going to make up rules as we go along?
It is not a valid point of order. The chair has
already
repress
it, Mr. Chairman, because you don't.
On that ruling.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman is not in order.
That may be, but I appeal your ruling.
The gentleman is not recognized.
Point of parliamentary inquiry,
the ruling of the chair.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
Parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Gotti, do you remember
Parliamentary inquiry. Parliamentary inquiry.
Parliamentary inquiry.
A parliamentary inquiry is not in order. Motion is not germane, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings,
I move to table the ruling of the chair.
All those in favor of tabling the appeal, respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
No.
In the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote. I ask for a recorded vote.
Mr. Chairman, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Sorry, that look. Oh,
it's good.
How dare you ask for a vote?
The best line is at the end. It's my favorite line I've ever heard on C-SPAN in my life.
All right.
The gentleman's point of order is not well taken.
It's right on point.
No, it's not.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman state is point of order.
Point of order.
It is not a point of order.
Point of order.
Point of order. Point of order. Point of order. Point of order. Point of order.
That is not a proper point of order. The gentleman will suspend.
The witnesses have the right.
The gentleman will suspend. The gentlewoman will suspend. The gentlewoman will suspend.
His time has expired, Mr. Chairman. By 2.5 minutes.
Gentleman is not recognized.
And the chairman is not being proper.
The chairman is being proper.
Mr. Chairman, I think you have no choice but to recognize such a motion.
I do not.
I raise my point of order, and I insist on it.
What is the point of order?
I move to subpoena Steve Bannon.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adjourn.
Second.
You're not recognized for that purpose.
Oh, my God.
No, you didn't go to the end. Oh.
It was the end. That was the whole clip.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Did you hear the line in there? One of the gals yells, "Do you need to take your meds?"
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
that is my favorite moment. I've never seen anything like that, where a senator shouts at another senator's, "Do you need to take your meds?" That's an amazing moment.
Congress approval. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. 22%. Yeah, they are representing you.
Mueller's getting the job done, though. Bob's dozen has rolled out. I think this makes it nearly 30 indictments, which 5, if you count like Flynn, have pleaded guilty. So play this one. We've got our indictments.
Indictments filed just moments ago by the special counsel before a grand jury. Robert Mueller, part of the Russia investigation. Indictments filed against more Russians.
Yeah, it's a remarkable turn of events. It comes just hours after President Trump referred to the Mueller probe again as a witch hunt, and just a few days before he meets with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The president has said he will bring up the election meddling of 2016, but he has not said it in a way that many Republicans on Capitol Hill wish it would be more aggressive. He has said it is in terms of almost...
That's fine. Now, I read it, and I have it linked in the show notes, unfilter.show.
There's some juicy stuff in there.
Yeah, it is pretty good. It really, there is your good buddy.
My friend.
Michael Hayden, the former NSA director who turned off the surveillance during 9/11 and then turned it back on afterwards. He made an observation that I agree with, and that is there's a lot of good forensic details in there. What that means is like a level of detail that we haven't gotten before. Now, I will say this, though. If you read Chase's other really great buddy, Devin Nunes.
Yeah, good guy.
If you read his report, which we've linked to many times, it is all in there. And Nunes he's fired up. He feels like this is a one-sided indictment. He wants more indictments. Nunes wants more indictments.
Yeah,
play this one.
Yeah, he sure does.
Page after page of that. And actually, there's more in this report than what's in the indictment. Okay? And this is what's very frustrating. So So it's great that they indicted Russians. Yes, they did bad things. I mean, they're always up to bad things. We know that. They have very sophisticated intelligence capabilities in Russia. And they're constantly attacking the United States and our allies. However, in the indictment, they leave out some really important people that they also went after. So the indictment plays like they were only going after the Democrats, when Bob Mueller and all his investigators and his lawyers know for a fact that they also targeted Republicans. Why is that not in the indictment? It makes the indictment look ridiculous.
Okay. So
I'm not saying they shouldn't be indicted.
The
I'm just saying that
were targeting both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah. And they know that. It's in our report. So why doesn't Department of Justice allow this to be declassified so the American public can see this?
The other thing is that
what do you suppose he's getting to here? What is he getting at here?
I really don't know, because it's like, okay, I mean, all they're doing.
I think he's trying to make the case that these are very political. They're going to get to in the clip there about how there's very, oh, actually, I don't know if you still have it loaded. You might actually just let it play. Yeah, let it play. Well,
all right.
People are never going to see justice, right? I mean, we don't have jurisdiction over these people. They're not going to come to the U.S., and so they really won't actually be held accountable.
Right. They're intelligence officers, so they're not going to be held accountable. It doesn't.
Oh, Devin, just stop, man.
Does it mean though that we shouldn't?
Dude,
I know it's true, but like that doesn't help make his point to me. It's like taking jabs here and there. Like, come on, talk about what.
Here's what his point is. His point is this is politically framed. They didn't indict anybody for going after. They did try to go after the RNC. They did try to do that. But they didn't indict anybody for that. And the people they did indict are never going to see the inside of a courtroom. They're it's 11 intelligence officers, and the other guy is connected to it. Like, right. So it's the 12 in total, maybe the one guy out of the 12, but they're never, ever going to go to a court. They're never going to go inside a U.S. jail cell.
Right.
And so you have sort of this easy, super clean, put a bow on it indictment, but it doesn't really cover anything super new here. And I think I want to just take a moment, and I want to just remind everybody that, at least in my opinion, there's two very different things between screwing around with the election in some way by buying Facebook ads, by maybe trying to connect with somebody on Trump's team. Those are two different things. Trying to connect to somebody on Trump's team, collusion, and trying to buy Facebook ads or influence the election through public perception, like maybe by releasing emails. Those are two different things. So if I'm not clear, I'm not saying this very clear, but what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between collusion and influence. And there could be a world where it is very, 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 very likely that there was influence, because there's probably a long history of influence, just like Mexico and Canada and China and India at different levels try to influence the U.S. election, and different countries are probably being more aggressive or less aggressive about it. But there's a big difference between that and direct collusion between somebody in Trump's campaign and the Russians, or particularly Trump. And I think this indictment right now is sort of being used to confuse those two things. People are kind of talking about those two things as if they're one thing, as if the Russia hacking is all one inclusive thing. But the Russia hacking and collusion are two separate issues.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Yeah, they're separate things and separate. I wouldn't call it necessarily separate investigations per se, but everything is being looked at. And so
maybe that's what's leading to the confusion. Is that,
and that's where I think Devin, I understand his agenda here, but he also got to look at the full picture of this, and that's where it's like, we only heard about one side of it, but then again, Mr. Nunes, you also didn't interview key people from the Republican side during your investigation on the House panel, right? So it's like you can criticize on one end, but on the other end, you do things to protect your side too.
Yeah. I mean, that's his. Yeah, I mean, sure, that's his team, that's his tribe.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I mean, to hear him criticize one thing while he's alone been doing it himself it's like the insult to me is a little bit like come on, man.
It would have been. I think there's an opportunity lost here.
Yeah.
So remember, he's pretty close to the source material. He's had hands on all this stuff. And it would be it would have been a much different discussion after the indictment was released if there was Russians named in there for going after the RNC too. It would have been, I think it would have been a very good thing politically for everyone. It would have dialed down the rhetoric and the temperature of this to something that affected both parties, that everyone suffered from, that affected everyone, because it did. The only difference is that they were just less successful. And it's just I just think I reframe this in my mind. If they could have, with all the investigation they've been doing, if they could have also included that stuff,
right,
it would have been I think it would have been a really good thing for the country. And I think that might be where he's coming from. He just may be too close to the sun to fully articulate it.
No, I think you articulated that very well. I mean, I agree with that.
All of that comes out right before Trump summit, which is amazing. How great was that? Like, that is
the Friday news dump play. That wasn't.
That was a Bob power play right there. Is what that was. That was Bob just reminding Trump of the enormous amount of power he has.
I'm going to add a little bit more to that. I think it's more than Bob. I think there's a little Rob in there, because Rob didn't have to. I can see it. Yeah, I mean, Rob didn't have to step up to the podium.
Yeah, Bob and Rob.
Bob and Rob. Rob didn't have to do Bob. I'm sorry, damn it, you did that.
Rob got up on the podium.
Rob,
and,
yes,
laid it all out
Rob, and he was trying to be like very stringent, because he's been fighting a little battle on his own where people have talked about, oh, hey, let's get him impeached, let's get him out of there. And some has speculated, hey, let's get him out of there because he's the only one that could legally get rid of the special counsel and get rid of Bob. But that being said, seeing Rob up there and just he was laying it all out there on Friday.
Looking good too. He's looking bold.
Well, I think he's been taking a lot of flack. He did the testimony and testifying and all that stuff, and he got to a point where he's just like, you know what, I'm here to do my job. And I mean, he's Republican. Bob's Republican. There are other members on the team that are also Republican. And he's trying to make sure it's not a partisan situation, and he's trying to just come out there from a legal, straight perspective. And I did respect that a bit.
I think it played well.
Yeah, I think it did.
I just added a clip.
Okay,
it's 3A of. We could just play like a couple of moments of Rod up there. Rob and Rod. It's Rod and Rob.
Yeah, here's Rob and Rod.
Yeah. Today, a grand jury in the District of Columbia returned an indictment presented by the Special Counsel's Office. The indictment charges 12 Russian military officers by name for conspiring to interfere with the 2016 presidential election. 11 of the defendants are charged with conspiring to hack into computers, steal documents, and release those documents with the intent to interfere in the election. One of those defendants and a 12th Russian military officer are charged with conspiring to infiltrate computers of organizations involved in administering elections, including state boards of election, secretaries of state, and companies that supply software used to administer elections.
Now, by the way, this is where I think, Devin missed the whole Republican side of it. The states, and, that was in the court documents and everything. I believe more than half of the states were Republican states that were targeted.
Yeah.
And so to say it was all Democratic, no. I mean, there were swing states targeted. There were red states targeted, blue states targeted. He could have went down that route. And this, by the way, going into this speech, the president was briefed by Rod. Rod briefed him and told him what was going to come down and what was going to happen. So
yeah. I think we're going with Rob now, though.
But Rob. Bob, sorry.
So the other thing about this is, so not only was Trump briefed about it, but I think when you listen to when he and I don't know, maybe we should keep playing a little bit more. But
okay.
I think what he's saying here. In fact, if you could back it up like 10 seconds and then play it back, and then we'll continue on, because I want to talk specifically what he's saying here. I think is really important, because what he's talking about really, I think, is releasing stuff via WikiLeaks. So let's play this back and see if I'm interpreting this right.
All right.
In administering elections, including state boards of election.
You might have to go back a little further.
All right.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Are charged with conspiring to infiltrate computers
here we go.
Organizations involved in administering elections, including state boards of election, secretaries of state, and companies that supply software used to administer elections.
That wasn't it.
Oh, okay.
I think it was earlier, but it sounded like. So it sounds like in here, in the indictment, they don't call out WikiLeaks directly. When you read the indictment, they don't actually say the name WikiLeaks, but they talk about releasing information. And so it's got to be WikiLeaks. Play a little more, I guess.
Sure.
According to the allegations in the indictment, the defendants worked for 2 units of the main intelligence directorate of the Russian General Staff, known as the GRU. The units engaged in active cyber operations to interfere in the 2016 presidential election. There was one unit that engaged in active cyber operations by stealing information, and a different unit that was responsible for disseminating the stolen information. The defendants used 2 techniques to steal information. First, they used a scheme known as spear phishing, which involves sending misleading email messages and tricking the users into disclosing their passwords and security information.
Podesta.
Second, the defendants hacked into computer networks and installed malicious software.
Kaspersky? No, I'm kidding. We don't know.
They called it X-Agent, which is very generic.
Yeah.
That allowed them to spy on users and capture keystrokes, take screenshots, and exfiltrate or remove data from those computers. The defendants accessed email accounts of volunteers and employees of a U.S. presidential campaign, including the campaign chairman, starting in March of 2016. They also hacked into the computer networks of a congressional campaign committee and a national political committee. The defendants covertly monitored the computers, implanted hundreds of files containing malicious computer code, and stole emails and other documents. The conspirators created fictitious online personas, including DC Leaks and Guccifer 2.0, and they used those personas to release information, including thousands of stolen emails and other documents, beginning in June of 2016. The defendants falsely claimed that DC Leaks was a group of American hackers and that Guccifer 2.0 was a lone Romanian hacker. In fact, both were created and controlled by the Russian GRU.
Wow.
Yeah. So the timeline that he lays out there is that, and this checks out, right, as we know, is Podesta gets fished in March of 2016.
Yep.
Now the phishing, the problem, I really wish it was something more sophisticated than a phishing attack, because then it would just be so much more believable. The other element is Bill Binney, or I forget his last name, the former NSA leaker, or I guess whistleblower. He and a group of other people did a study that looked at the timestamps and the data sizes and argued that it was more of a USB 2.0 copy speed than it was anything that was captured over the network. We've linked to that in the past. But that aside, the one thing that I still have trouble with is the basic timeline where it all starts. It's just the one simple thing is Podesta gets fished in March of 2016, but Trump doesn't win the party nomination until July 19th of 2016. In fact, there was still a bunch of other clowns in the race.
Well, when did Trump officially like kind of lean and nod in and say, "Yeah, I'm going to run"?
I don't know the date, but I did look this up last week. And if you go by, and I have three different timelines linked in the show notes, so you guys can check this out. The first time that the DNC is there was a suspected attempted attack, when the first time the FBI contacted them is back in 2014 or 2015. Which would have been well before Trump announced, I think in 2014, well before he announced his intent to even run.
I mean, the
timeline's just, it's what it is.
Yeah,
it's just what it is.
There is one thing, though, that we did know even before Trump was putting his hat into the ring, and that was Hillary was making a run again. And we also know that Mr. Putin did not like Hillary very much. And obviously,
but I think the one person where I feel like part of this is a snub against Julian Assange because we're not giving Assange enough credit. He hates the Clintons. He hated Hillary.
That's true.
And on June 12th, he had an interview on British television where he says they had obtained a batch of emails that they were going to be releasing. Now, again, that's before Trump wins the general.
Or the primary? Or you mean the overall election, you mean?
I guess the primary, yes.
Yeah, primary.
I'm sorry, the primary. It's before he was the candidate for the party.
Right.
So before Trump was the Republican nominee, Assange was on television talking about. So maybe Putin had a time machine and maybe Assange also had a time machine, or maybe Russia's always just meddling and Assange hates Hillary. And if you recall, what they exposed wasn't really anything other than corruption at the DNC and the ass screwing that they were giving Bernie Sanders. Like they were really, colluding against Bernie Sanders. The top echelon, like Debbie, had to resign. They showed that they funneled a ton of money for people that were donating to Hillary to a very few special candidates and superdelegates, and that they showed they were buying off superdelegates.
Yeah.
But they didn't really show much else than that. And I'm not saying that John Podesta wasn't fished by the Russians, because it's entirely possible. It would make sense. I could see why they would want to do that. I think it's still worth considering that a phishing attack could have simply been, I mean.
Well, I don't remember too much how we speculated it, but I also thought that maybe, a wide net was cast, right?
It was, yeah.
And John Podesta just so happened to be the guy that didn't know about internet
think about
security.
It was targeted to a degree. I mean, I think that's a fair assessment to make. It must have been targeted to a degree.
Yeah. But maybe targeted to just, Democratic top party people, I mean, who knows?
Some RNC officials were also targeted, though.
Yeah, that's true.
So it could have been.
There was some hacking, not if you would call it hacking or not, but there's some compromised RNC stuff as well.
Yeah,
or attempts, I should say.
I guess what I go back to though is I still haven't seen any conclusive link between WikiLeaks and Russia, and there's nothing concrete that ties Guccifer to the Russian government other than they say so.
Right.
Like, there's nothing in the indictment that, they present no evidence.
Well, to be fair, I mean, we're only going to get the speech per se, but, if it ever went to trial, I mean, we can watch that.
I'm just saying those are things that still seems really tidy and really easy.
Sure.
And it seems also possible. I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm just saying it seems really tidy, and maybe I'd like more information. But they did get a chance to talk about all of this at the big Helsinki summit.
That's right.
Do you want to play this breakdown of we can go just a little bit into it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It began with a handshake. A quick photo opportunity, President Trump with a grin, President Putin stone-faced. And then it was down to business.
Great to be with you.
After the cameras left the room, it was just the two men and their translators, an unprecedented 2-hour off-the-record meeting. They emerged together, the President of the United States standing side by side with the President of Russia, addressing the world, and pointed questions about Russia's interference in America's election.
Do you hold Russia at all accountable for anything in particular?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish, and I think we're all to blame. There was no collusion at all.
Those comments coming on the heels of last week's grand jury indictment of 12 Russian intelligence officers for their alleged roles in committing cyber crimes to interfere in the 2016 elections.
The indictment charge.
All right.
See, that again is not collusion. That's influencing, right? That's so you see how he just blurred the lines there. So Trump's talking about collusion, and they're talking about what people like to call meddling. Those are two different topics. The indictment is talking about meddling.
Two different actions. Yeah. I mean, totally. Yeah.
So, but the presenter here is blurring the lines between the two. He's because Trump is clearly talking about collusion, not about the meddling. So just pointing that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
He's getting called out for something that he's not talking about.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, it's you can't exchange those two different things. you got to kind of separate them out, because when you're starting clouding those two different words, then it just kind of all gets mushed in together, and that's not.
Here's
really
why I think that matters too, because meddling represents a new type of attempt to insert influence that probably is an extension of an ongoing campaign. And if it's true, there is a big silver lining here for all of us, and that is now the American public is very aware of it. And there is now a high political cost to Russia. And the message has now been sent that we're no longer going to ignore it, and that the public is angry about this. Now, I guess it's possible that they weren't trying to meddle in the election, but we've seen the ads they tried to buy. It would seem negligent if they didn't try to influence the election. But we as a public need to be aware of the ways that different countries attempt to do that. And so there is actually a silver lining to all of this if we could stop blurring the lines between collusion and meddling, because there is a good message for the public to be aware, because it puts political pressure on Russia to knock it the hell off if all of a sudden the rather ignorant American public becomes hyper aware of something they're trying to do. Like, that's a good thing because it prevents Russia from doing it more. But we need to be clear about what we're talking about. Continue on, sir.
Yeah, well, I was going to add one thing is I could see a potential blurring between the two if, for example, if there was, and this is where the collusion part would be, coordination, right, between one campaign or one group of people and Russia to influence. So I can see where there could be a potential blurring. But it's not to say that there was a collusion to influence or to attempt to.
Really
but I
need to make
see
that WikiLeaks connection pretty concrete too, because Assange is he's a well-known activist who goes back and does this. We just actually linked to a WikiLeaks article today in the show notes that talks about the CIA influencing elections in another country. It's something we are meddling in other elections right now, and WikiLeaks just published an article about it. Like, they're still doing it. They're still out there.
Yeah.
And this is something they've been known for doing. So I think you'd have to really, really prove that concrete connection. And the thing is there's so much motivation on the federal government's part to really smear his character. He's a rapist. He's a traitor. And now this just makes him a Russian operative as well. So, it really makes Assange part of the villain in the story. And that is also super tidy. That's why I get a little skeptical about it. And I would just like to see more proof of that link.
Sure.
And as Guccifer as well. We can actually probably stop this part. Actually,
okay. Well,
I don't know if you already.
I'm still on it. But I mean, it's your.
Why don't we play it to the quote unquote most controversial moment of the night?
All right.
There's 12 Russian military officers by name for conspiring to interfere with the 2016 presidential election.
Today, Putin offering his own response to questions of meddling.
Назовите мне хотя бы один факт, который говорит о каком-то сговоре.
All right, so he said there, can you name a single fact that proves collusion? This is utter nonsense.
And then this offer. He says he would allow Russian authorities to question the 12 indicted officers with Mueller's team present.
Присутствовать на этих допросах.
We can allow them into the country. They will be present at
But
questions.
he added a condition. Russia must then be allowed to interrogate American intelligence agents. President Trump sounded enthusiastic at the prospect.
And what he did is an incredible offer. He offered to have the people working on the case come and work with their investigators with respect to the 12 people. I think that's an incredible offer. Okay, thank you.
But here was the moment that truly ignited the firestorm today, when President Trump appeared to throw America's intelligence community under the bus.
Would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
My people came to me, Dan Coates came to me, and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be. So I have great confidence.
Oh, my goodness.
Oy.
So that was that got people really upset. We'll cover the reaction in a minute. I want to actually stay focused on the substance for a bit if we can. There was a question directed right at Vlad about interfering with the 2016 election. Why don't we give that some room to play? Because I think,
Mr. President, you tweeted this morning that it's U.S. foolishness, stupidity, and the Mueller probe that is responsible for the decline in U.S. relations with Russia. Do you hold Russia at all accountable for anything in particular? And if so, what would you consider them that they are responsible for?
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish.
I have a question here, and I'll rewind it back so we can hear the full answer.
No, you can keep it going. No, we know what he says.
Okay. Why is it when the question was directed about Russia, specifically, that the first thing he did was us, and then started talking crap about us? Now, I'm not saying that to say, well, he should just be only talking crap about Russia, or anything like that. But that was the first thing he did. And
this is something I think he should work on, because I think what this is his technique. Is he's flipping the question around, and and what people often label this as, he's creating a moral equivalency between us and a brutal regime. But what he's doing is he's trying to say, like, what? You're so perfect, your shit doesn't stink, and he's trying to turn it around a little bit. Because he's in an awkward situation where the guy's standing right next to him, right? And he's trying to make this thing a success. That's the awkward dance he's doing with Kim too. Is like he's got to be firm and he's got to make people at home happy, but at the same time he wants to make a deal and he doesn't want to piss the person off because they got huge egos. I think one thing that Trump is good at is intuitively navigating people that have larger than life narcissistic personalities. I think he's got an intuitive sense of how to navigate those people. And so, to a fault, he's playing a word game here that comes across like he's slamming the United States when he's trying to build a moral equivalency, so then that way what he says isn't super offensive to his guest.
You know what? I can buy that. I will buy that.
All been foolish. We should have had this.
Let me back it up.
That they are responsible for.
Yes, I do. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish. We should have had this dialogue a long time ago, a long time, frankly, before I got to office. And I think we're all to blame. I think that the United States now has stepped forward along with Russia, and we're getting together, and we have a chance to do some great things, whether it's nuclear proliferation in terms of stopping. We have to do it. Ultimately, that's probably the most important thing that we can be working on. But I do feel that we have both made some mistakes. I think that the probe is a disaster for our country. I think it's kept us apart. It's kept us separated. There was no collusion at all.
All right, stop.
Everybody knows.
What I would say, if I were Trump, the way I would answer this is, within reason of how he answers things, is where I might go here is, we've all made mistakes. I think this probe and the rhetoric around this political situation has greatly damaged a nation, or our relationship with Russia. But at the same time, the way they handled the situation in Crimea has been badly received by the world, and that's made our relationship more strenuous. You could say something.
It felt like he didn't want to say anything bad about Russia.
Yeah,
and that's the general impression, because I watched most of this press conference, and there were times where it's like, defend us. Like, we're not all crap here, and
I watch this and I go, in a way, though, he's not wrong about anything he's saying. Like, he's not saying anything technically wrong. Like, them working together is something that should have happened a long time ago. There were mistakes made on both sides, and working together to get less nukes in the world is a really good thing, not just for the U.S., but it's a really good thing for Russia, too. And that's all true. Let's play a little more.
Yeah.
People are being brought out to the fore. So far that I know, virtually none of it related to the campaign. And they're going to have to try really hard to find somebody that did relate to the campaign. That was a clean campaign. I beat Hillary Clinton easily. And frankly, we beat her. And I'm not even saying from the standpoint, we won that race. And it's a shame that there can even be a little bit of a cloud over it. People know that, people understand it, but the main thing, and we discussed this also, is zero collusion. And it has had a negative impact upon the relationship.
What does that mean? We discussed this, in zero collusion. What I mean?
Yeah, I know, he's just rambling. I mean, the point he's trying to make is that it's affecting the relationship, but it's a shaggy dog story to get there.
Right. Which, by the way, the relationship hasn't been good since what? 19? If I have to add 19 in front of it, it's been a while.
Do you want to bail on this one? Because there's others we can get to.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because this is the one I think I want to talk to you about. Play this one. They asked Putin about the P-tape. And I wasn't super convinced by his answer. He kind of, he makes the point, what I think he's trying to say is Donald Trump didn't matter enough to me to even know he was in the country. But that doesn't really answer the question. Take a listen.
Right, yeah.
The compromising material. Yeah, I did heard these rumors that we allegedly collected compromising material on Mr. Trump when he was visiting Moscow. Well, distinguished colleague, let me tell you this. When President Trump visited Moscow back then, I didn't even know that he was in Moscow. I treat President Trump with utmost respect. But back then, when he was a private individual, a businessman, nobody informed me that he was in Moscow. Well, let's take St. Petersburg Economic Forum, for instance. There were over 500 American businessmen, the high-ranking, the high-level ones. I don't even remember the last names of each and every one of them. Well, do you remember, do you think that we try to collect compromising material on each and every single one of them? Well, it's difficult to imagine another nonsense of a bigger scale than this.
We didn't collect on everybody, just a few.
He's essentially saying there, because he says, with all due respect to Mr. Trump, I didn't give a shit that he was in the country. He was a B-level celebrity. I don't even track when Clooney's in the country.
But he didn't say no.
Right. He didn't say maybe the FSB was just always monitoring these kinds of things in that hotel because they watch everyone in that hotel. Like, that's possible.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's Trump says there at the end, if there was a tape, it would be out already.
Yeah, I'll play it because there's only a few seconds left.
All right. Well, please just disregard these issues and don't think about this anymore again.
Oh, and don't think about this anymore again?
That's the part that makes him sound guilty.
It's like, all right, I answered your question. Don't ask it again. Like, oh, God. All right. Let me back it up a little seconds. I don't want to cut off the president.
Imagine another nonsense of a bigger scale than this. Well, please just disregard these issues and don't think about this anymore again.
And I have to say, if they had it, it would have been out long ago. And if anybody watched...
cut off there. Sorry. There we go.
That's okay. Yeah. So there was a moment that I really appreciated. Of course, it was a Russian journalist that asked the question, but a Russian journalist asked Putin about Trump's recent tough talk about the Nord 2 natural gas pipeline. Super quick recap. Germany has this long-standing agreement to buy natural gas from Russia. It came up right before the NATO summit. Trump's like, hey, here we are protecting your asses. Meanwhile, you're subsidizing Russia's economy and you're not helping us at all here. We want to sell you nat gas. And then it comes out, according to Trump, that in private conversations, Angela Merkel essentially said, look, dumbass, your shit's across the ocean and his stuff I can get from a pipe over land. Which one do you think I'm going to do? That is a way more guaranteed. I know you've got boats, but this isn't widely reported, but it happened. In their little 2-hour conversation, Putin assured the president that things would be okay. We'll get to that perhaps, but I essentially it's in this clip that Putin says, yeah, things will probably be okay. We could probably work something out. Maybe there's some room here to work things out. But the way they dance around the topic is kind of interesting because what I think it shows you is their real relationship. Putin and Trump's real relationship, I think, kind of comes up in here. So play clip number 7 here, Mr. Chase.
Sure.
Sets of questions each. First, the Russian journalist will ask the question. Please give your affiliation. Good afternoon. My name is Alexei Meshkov, Interfax Information Agency. I have a question to President Trump. During your recent European tour, you've mentioned that the implementation of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline makes Europe a hostage of Russia, and you suggested that you could free Europe from this by supplying American LNG. But this cold winter actually showed that the current mechanism of supply of fuel to Europe is quite viable. At the same time, as far as I know, US had to buy even Russian gas for Boston. I have a question. The implementation of your idea has a political tinge to it, or is it a practical one? Because there will be a gap formed in the supply and demand, mechanism. And first, it's the consuming countries who will fall into this gap. And the second question, before the meeting with President Putin, you called him an adversary, a rival, and yet you expressed hope that you will be able to bring this relationship to a new level. Did you manage to do this?
Actually, I called him a competitor, and a good competitor he is. And I think the word competitor is a compliment. I think that we will be competing when you talk about the pipeline. I'm not sure necessarily that it's in the best interests of Germany or not, but that was a decision that they made. We'll be competing. As you know, the United States is now, or soon will be, but I think it actually is right now the largest in the oil and gas world. So we're going to be selling LNG, and we'll have to be competing with the pipeline. And I think we'll compete successfully, although there is a little advantage locationally. So I just wish them luck. I mean, I did. I discussed with Angela Merkel in pretty strong tones. But I also know where they're all coming from. And they have a very close source. So we'll see how that all works out. But we have lots of sources now, and the United States is much different than it was a number of years ago when we weren't able to extract what we can extract today. So today we're number one in the world at that, and I think we'll be out there competing very strongly. Thank you very much.
If I may, I throw in some 2 cents. We talked to Mr. President, including this subject as well. We are aware of the stance of President Trump, and I think that we, as a major oil and gas power, and the United States is a major oil and gas power as well, we could work together on regulation of international markets, because neither of us is actually interested in the plummeting of the prices, and the consumers will suffer as well, and the consumers in the United States will suffer as well, and the shale gas production.
He wants regulation, Chase,
and they want to
work together,
and they want to be the ones running that regulation.
Yeah. So this is a nat gas pipeline, not an oil pipeline. Just point of order on that. Point of order. Parliamentary order.
No, point of order, Chris. Point of order.
Yeah. Sorry. And that is something we do have quite a bit of here in the States. So that is something we could be pretty competitive in.
Yeah.
Now, there was a classic Trump moment where he brings up the server, and that always gets people fired up.
My first question for you, sir, is who do you believe? My second question is, would you now, with the whole world watching, tell President Putin, would you denounce what happened in 2016, and would you warn him to never do it again?
So let me just say that we have two thoughts. You have groups that are wondering why the FBI never took the server. Haven't they taken the server? Why was the FBI told to leave the office of the Democratic National Committee? I've been wondering that. I've been asking that for months and months, and I've been tweeting it out and calling it out on social media. Where is the server? I want to know where is the server?
Where's the box?
And what is the server
So I got a question.
Yeah.
I'll put this out on unfilter.show/contact. Maybe you can let us know. I got a link in the show notes that says that the DNC server was actually 140 cloud servers, and that they got an image, but they, obviously weren't going to extract the actual physical server, and that the FBI didn't get that image, but that the cyber firm that they hired, I forgot, Cloudflare, not Cloudflare, I can't remember, CrowdStrike, I can't remember who they hired anymore. It's one of the well-known ones. They analyzed the image and then handed the results over to the FBI. So it's kind of nuanced. Trump, as he often does, sort of simplifies things like the NATO folks aren't paying their fair share into NATO, which really means they're not spending enough on their own military budget. They're not spending 2% of their military budget, of their budget on military.
Right.
That's what they're not paying their fair share into NATO actually means in Trump speak. So he does sometimes simplify things to sort of brand it, to sort of memify it a little bit. I think it's a very successful technique. And so when he says the server, this article that I have linked in the show notes claims it's 140 boxes. I don't know if that's true or not. I haven't seen a lot of backup data for that because I've also heard other stories, including multiple iterations of where Hillary servers lived over the years. So if you know or have any source material, unfilter.show/contact, I'd like to see that. You want to shift gears to reaction? See the reaction was the strongest I've ever seen it to anything Trump's done, I think. It was
And it was bipartisan too. I mean, it was.
Oh, well, yeah. I do love that whenever any Republicans criticize Trump, that's always the lead talking point is bipartisan criticism.
Bipartisan,
well, yeah. But when it's John McCain and Lindsey Graham and, it was bipartisan. Yeah, I mean, it was, though. But, really, I thought your good buddy.
Oh, my gosh, it's Anderson Cooper, everybody.
I thought he had a pretty substantive take on it. Why don't you play his
You have been watching perhaps one of the most disgraceful performances by an American president at a summit in front of a Russian leader, certainly that I've ever seen. An extraordinary press conference. I'm back with CNN Global Affairs analyst Susan Glasser.
What's so extraordinary is really the thing that they're all taking issue with is that Trump kind of implied he didn't agree with the intelligence agency assessments and the indictment. Let's go to Tapper. Tapper, I thought, also had a very strong, palatable reaction. CNN was losing it.
Jake, what's your bottom line takeaway from what we saw today?
The bottom line takeaway is, according to Democrats and Republicans, intelligence agencies, every leader of the intelligence agencies, senators, the House, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the House Intelligence Committee, Russia launched cyber attacks against the United States to interfere in the election. They did that to the people of the United States. And today,
spearfished us.
President Trump sided with Russia over not just the intelligence agencies of the United States, but also the people of the United States. He took a KGB officer, a known liar's word for it. Why he did so, if it had to do with his desire to not be seen as illegitimate because of the fact that Russia interfered, I don't know. I can't really get into that. I'm not a doctor, but I can tell you.
All right. Okay.
Now leave that to Sanjay Gupta. Okay.
Oh my God, how good are this? Like, I'm not a doctor. Okay, that's great. Yeah. Okay. So I thought that was pretty strong. It's a pretty strong reaction. I also liked ABC's take on it. They do a roundup of some of that bipartisan criticism you mentioned.
Yeah.
The reaction, as you've seen back home, was immediate today, and not just from Democrats. Of the 51 Republicans in the Senate tonight, we've now heard from more than 30 of them already. The list is growing. And on Fox News, many voices sounding alarm, too. ABC's chief White House correspondent Jonathan Karl with what they're saying tonight.
The president's joint press conference was over for just a matter of minutes when fellow Republicans started pouncing. One of the first, Republican Senator Ben Sasse, releasing a statement saying, quote, "This is bizarre and flat out wrong." And then Senator Jeff Flake.
It was shameful, and I never thought I'd see an American president throw the intelligence community under the bus like that.
And even before the president left Helsinki, the Republican chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee unloaded on him.
The president's comments made us look as a nation more like a pushover.
The top Democrat in the Senate went so far as to suggest that Putin must have something on Trump.
Americans are scratching their head and saying, if that's not the explanation, that Putin has something on it, what is it? What the heck could it be?
Weighing in from Arizona, Senator John McCain called the president's press conference a tragic mistake. And, quote,
So I guess I want to recap. The great offense that happened here was that he said, we've both made mistakes, and some people say it's the Russians. I don't know if it is. Putin says it's not. And that is what all of this is referring to. Everything they just said about how we've made ourselves look weak in front of the Russians. It happened on foreign soil. Lester, there's a clip of Lester in the supporter sync where he gets so emotional about this, he starts to choke up. Lester starts to choke up at the end of the NBC Nightly News because he's so verklempt over this tragedy that has happened. But when I watch the press conference, what I see is somebody who says things a little rough, a little inelegant, and likes to bang on his go-to topics when he's put in a hard spot. But when I look at the substantive things that have developed from this summit, if nothing else, let's really think about this for a second. If Donald Trump destroyed America's economy, crashed our country into the ground, but normalized relations with Russia, that is a gift to humanity. It's a big deal. Like, this is an important thing to happen here. And when we begin the conversation, we are giving Putin an opportunity to receive prestige on the world stage and bring Russia up out of the former Soviet Union and back onto the world stage. You heard him use the words in that press conference, we are a gas and oil power. That's what all of this is about. It's about Russia coming back onto the world stage as an economic player, as a competitor. They're a bigger competitor than they were 5 years ago even, especially now in nat gas and oil, now that we're fracking like sons of bitches.
I would be okay with all of that, as long as, I mean, to do it under the guise right now of the investigation, right? And, you know, with everything that I know, and your good buddy, you know, Mr. Comey, you know, and his firing, which prompted, you know, the whole investigation in the first place, is you would think that the president, if he had this vision and he was going down that road and saying, you know, hey, let's try to bring Russia back into the mix, that he would not be so adversarial against the investigation, right?
Here's the thing, and this is why I'm starting to feel kind of good about this, is because the original calculation I made all the way back on the week of Comey's firing still adds up. And I think it's indicative of a consistent cold calculation. If you remember our conversation at the time, you're like, why would Trump do something so politically disastrous like this? And my response was, he's either a maniac or he really, truly, deeply, profoundly believes there was no collusion and is taking the best action he thinks he should, regardless of the political fallout, because he knows in the long term he's likely to be found innocent and he needs to take the actions he needs to take. And it's, you know, we didn't know at the time. But I go back to this. He has a moment to reach out with Russia and North Korea, and he has seized on both of those, regardless of the unbelievable political heat he takes for it. The lead up with all the little Rocket Man blowback and Twitter diplomacy and how he should have his Twitter account taken away. And then he's going to get rolled by Kim. He's going to do something stupid. And then he leaves the summit. And he made a big commitment to end the war games. What was he thinking? It's every single step of the way, it's political heat. But when you step back and look at it, relations have simmered. They're not doing nuke tests. Things are progressing, although rough, they're progressing. When he starts this summit with Putin, it's giving Putin an opportunity to normalize relations. And the one thing you have to keep in mind is they're still 10 times smaller than the U.S. economy. They need us more than we need them.
Right, but then you don't have a meeting in private with nothing on the record.
I think you do. I think after all the leaks and all of the political backstabbing.
But see, he's already under a level of suspicion, right? You're already, you know, there's already a level of mistrust.
Right. But I go back to my Comey answer. If he truly profoundly believes and perhaps even knows there was no level of collusion, then he is seizing on an opportunity here that he would be a fool to pass on, regardless of the political heat that he's taking for it in the
that's
immediate
where
term.
I think, you know, if he believed that, you know, and if he, you know, obviously he does because he says it like almost every other sentence. No collusion, by the way.
Really? Oh, no collusion.
Yeah, no collusion, Chris.
He's a little insistent, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you don't have to pound it down. You know, just
he's insecure. He's obviously insecure about it,
right? And that's where it's like either is he trying to say it so many times that if something does bad come down the pipe, you know, through the investigation, that he can say, well, see, it's all rigged. It's all rigged.
So I look at two things. Number one, there's some substantive improvements in the relationship now. There's a communications channel, and there's much more political heat now if Russia does things to influence the 2018 election. Trump doing this now makes that a much riskier political calculation for Russia if they want to take active interference. Because this whole summit thing starts to fall apart if he does. So Trump doing this now is timing for the election good. It's a good thing. Also, when two nations, the ones that hold all of our nukes, are talking, that is a good thing. Like both those things are good. And if you want to argue that we shouldn't be having a conversation with somebody who murders journalists, then we should probably also be having a conversation about our relationship with Saudi Arabia and Qatar and all of those sons of bitches. Like you can't just pick and choose which brutal dictators you're okay with us having a super deep, passionate, loving relationship with, and which ones you're going to draw your arbitrary moral line on. Like, they're all bad guys. And we're pretty bad, too. I don't know if you've met our CIA and our drone program, but we're kinds of sons of bitches, too. We seem to be murdering people all over the world with ships in the sky.
Oh, yeah, no. We've definitely bashed how Obama used those drone programs ad nauseum. I mean, yeah, no, I'm not denying that we've not been the angels that we perceive ourselves to be at times. No, I get that. But
I feel like I've been really consistent with this point on Russia since Obama. In fact, if you're up for it, I have a clip that I'd like you to play, number 5, just to remind us how when this happened under the Obama administration, this was a really good thing.
Today, in anticipation of this important meeting and our time here together, I wanted to present you with a little gift which represents what President Obama and Vice President Biden and I have been saying. And that is, we want to reset our relationship. And
let's do it together.
So we will do it together, okay?
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome. We worked hard to get the right Russian word. Do you think we got it?
You get it wrong.
I got it wrong.
It should be перезагрузка. And this says перегрузка, which means overcharged.
Okay. Well, we won't let you do that to us. I promise.
Yeah. So, okay. Now, the other thing that has struck me about this is, okay, well, it's okay that he's talking to Putin, but he needs to be talking really tough. Like, take this opportunity to, like, rub his face in the shit that's on the carpet. But I want to go back in time one more time to Obama talking about how you can't just sit there and give Putin a hard time and harass him into complying.
In early September, when I saw President Putin in China, I felt that the most effective way to ensure that that didn't happen was to talk to him directly and tell him to cut it out. There were going to be some serious consequences if he didn't. And I had to have the same conversation with with President Xi. And what we've seen is some evidence that they have reduced, but not completely eliminated, these activities. The Russians can't change us or significantly weaken us. They are a smaller country. They are a weaker country. Their economy doesn't produce anything that anybody wants to buy except oil and gas and arms. Unless the American people genuinely think that the professionals in the CIA, the FBI, our entire intelligence infrastructure, many of whom, by the way, served in previous administrations and who are Republicans, are less trustworthy than the Russians, then people should pay attention to what our intelligence agencies say.
He talks so slow, Chase. He talks
now. To be fair, at least you know he's trying to obviously quantify his remarks.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
It's a comparison. It's a comparison for sure. I don't know. Would you rather have slow or just all over the map?
I don't know. I think actually there's a good percentage of people that prefer Trump because they feel like they can read him more clearly than they can read somebody like Obama, who's really calculating every word.
Now,
and some people I think are more comforted by that than the smooth talker.
I agree with you there.
I mean, when you're a politician, you probably should be a smooth talker. Otherwise, you freak.
I'm inclined
everybody
to
out.
agree. Sorry.
All right. So there was a pretty good debate between Glenn Greenwald, your good buddy, and I think the guy's name's John, and he is an author about trying to keep Trump's finger off the nuke button, about the big problem of nukes. And he managed to put, he being Glenn, managed to put a lot of my thoughts into words like he usually does. This is clip number 7. It's kind of a long one, but I'd like to play it because I think it's worth listening to, especially if you're really worked up this week.
rhetoric is so unbelievably unhinged. The idea that the phishing link sent to John Podesta and the Democratic National Committee are the greatest threat to American democracy in decades. People are now talking about it as though it's on par with 9/11 or Pearl Harbor, that the lights are blinking red in terms of the threat level. This is lunacy, this kind of talk. I spent years reading through the most top secret documents of the NSA, and I can tell you that not only do they send phishing links to Russian agencies of every type continuously on a daily basis, but do far more aggressive interference in the cybersecurity of every single country than Russia is accused of having done during the 2016 election. To characterize this as some kind of grave existential threat to American democracy is exactly the kind of rhetoric that we heard throughout the Bush-Cheney administration about what al-Qaeda was like. And I would just remind everybody as well that if you look at the United States' Russia policy during the administration of Barack Obama, look at what he did and said. In 2012, he mocked the idea spread by Mitt Romney that Russia was our greatest existential foe. Yes, that was before Crimea, but it was after Georgia. It was after they were accused of murdering dissidents and imprisoning journalists. He mocked that idea and said we have all kinds of reasons to try and get along with Russia. Even after 2016, after Crimea, after he was told that the Russians interfered in the U.S. election, he didn't talk about it as 9/11 or treat it like 9/11. He expelled a few Russian diplomats and urged everybody to keep it in perspective and said that Russia is the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world, behind even Italy, and not a grave threat to the United States. This kind of talk, this kind of climate, it's amazing. Joe's work is something I vehemently support, which is eliminating the threat of nuclear weapons. Yes, it'd be great if we had better leaders, but the leaders of the countries that have 90% of the nuclear stockpile happen to be Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. That's not going to change. So the question is not, do we wish we had better leaders? The question is, do we want these two countries trying to talk and resolve their differences peacefully, or do we want them isolating one another and feeling besieged and belligerent and attacked, which heightens all the tensions that Joe has devoted his career to combating? And I think it's much better to have the kind of dialogue that Barack Obama advocated with Russia than the kind of belligerence that Democrats now demand of our government.
I think it's a really, really great point. And it's what's amazing is that he's a Democrat progressive, and he's using the arguments of one of the most beloved Democrats, Obama. It's it's a strong argument because it's their own argument.
Yeah, and that's where, I get incredibly pessimistic and lethargic when it comes to our political system currently and our process, just because of all the money involved. And, I genuinely, try to be altruistic and like, hey, why can't we all get along? I mean, different countries have different resources and different positives, and why can't we all work together on these things?
I think it's nationalism. I think it's racism. Yeah. I think there is a bit of an inbred like tribalism. Tribalism is a factor here. It's tribalism. Russia is the other tribe. I really think that's part of it. And the indictment came down, and people use that as sort of this moment to sort of unleash all of this pent up anger and frustration.
Yeah.
And sort of confuse collusion and, I like to say influence, but they like to say meddling. I think influence is a more accurate description of what they tried to do. They tried to influence opinion. Meddling sounds, I don't know, it sounds more dramatic, I guess. Yeah. But I think Greenwald nailed it right there. I think this is a good thing to have them talking, and it's going to be a hell of a revelation if they can tie like Donnie Jr. to somebody connected close to Putin. Like if they can make a connection, and then then I might believe this stuff that they have dirt on Trump. I don't think so, though. I think Trump's motivations are more simpler and in our face. I don't think it's them holding a P-tape on him. I really think it's more he sees a good competitor in there, and he wants to try to get in with the EU, and by positioning and calling out that pipeline the way he did, he's bringing all of this to the forefront, and he's just putting it out there in front of everybody. And now they're just talking about it openly in a way that nobody was talking about this before. And I think that's actually a good thing too. And I think it shows you. That's the insight into the game he's playing right now. That's the real insight, because it's always about this stuff. It's always about the pipelines and selling huge weapons contracts and gas and oil contracts. It's always about that, dude. What do you always say?
I always say it. Show me the money. And that's where it is right now. And for me, you know, economics and capitalism and all that, you know, when it's done above board and being honest, I'm down for that. And when you have this investigation ongoing right now, and you kind of do things that, I don't know, play against the investigation, if that makes any sense, like, you know, some of the things that have been said and actions, and it's just like, you know, if I was personally under investigation, I wouldn't go and talk with the place or country that I was under investigation about.
But then he would be politically boxed in. He'd essentially be a lame duck because of
not necessarily.
What is potentially a politically motivated investigation.
But I think
like he would be missing an opportunity here.
Well, but there's plenty of other things to do. It's not like everything hinges on this one thing, right? And it's one of those situations where you're also your own worst enemy, where you keep talking about it. You keep feeding into that media machine, it's going to keep going and keep spinning. And I don't know if that's intentional or not intentional, but it's like, well, you don't have to keep it going. There's plenty of things that are happening both here and abroad that could be taken care of and taken not necessarily advantage of, but, you know, to help the better good for our country.
Well, this is just one of the exhausting defining qualities of the Trump administration is this chaos theory management style that is constantly looping in the media on the next hype
But is that good for us? Is that good for the country? This constant polarization, this constant, I mean, even in our own chat room, you know, we have very passionate chatters on both sides of the coin.
And on top of that, it seems to be spreading into other forms of discourse. So like technical communities are getting much more aggressive. Like it is affecting other aspects of online discourse, this polarization. It doesn't really seem to be happening here in real life. I'll give you, you know, real life example of I've spent damn near almost a month and a half, 2 months in Texas in totality in the last couple of months.
You like Texas.
I've been down here a lot. Thankfully, Linux Academy has paid for my stay, and Hadi and Angela have made it possible for me to travel, and that's been I've been really fortunate. But I have not once in that entire time even gotten a hint of any individual either out on the street or here at Linux Academy of anyone's politics. I haven't seen like any Trump hats. I have not in real life.
Now, what city?
This polarized situation doesn't exist. I've been spending time in Austin, Dallas, and Fort Worth.
So isn't Austin more?
Liberal.
Yeah, it's more liberal part of the conservative area of Texas.
I mean, I saw naked people on bikes. I saw all kinds of crazy
that's
stuff.
Seattle.
But I never had any kind of inflammatory, hostile, hyper-aggressive, tribalized argument or even just in-my-face politics like I see on Twitter. I load up Twitter these days, and I sometimes just give up for the day because it's random, uninformed, extreme political opinion. After you see this with people tweeting you all the time, people wouldn't shout that. Like if people say you looked like Devin Nunes, you might have a couple of hecklers, but you wouldn't have this issue until just recently. Now it's just started to bubble over into real life, and now you're starting to see it come into real life. Like the internet discourse is starting to impact real life. And it's not happening a lot, but it's happening more and more. And so I can't really see a silver lining on this. Sometimes when we get pushed to extremes, we swing the other way. Maybe you'll start seeing people talk about taking digital diets or, social media, canceling their social media accounts. You might start seeing more of that. But I don't know.
And I hope, that our viewers and our listeners, know that, I mean, at the end of the day, I believe we're all human. We all have our thoughts and our insights and our beliefs and things that are going on. Obviously, we're on the outside looking in on this. And, we have received some pretty enlightening emails from our viewers and listeners who are on inside tracks, if you will. And, I don't want to talk and divulge them who they are. But it's one of those things where at the end of the day, we're doing the best that we can, and hopefully, we don't go to World War III. I don't want a war. I don't think anybody does. We all want to live well, and happy, and get along with each other, and hopefully, at some point we'll be able to kind of breathe a bit again. But I feel like
Amen, brother.
Yeah.
In the meantime, people be good and just hang out. If the internet's starting to bug you, go outside.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like a really cliche thing to say, but it actually
true.
works. Unless it's 107 degrees out.
No.
Hey, what do you say we wrap up with the Russia stuff? We have some miscellaneous clips that people can find in the supporter sync if they want more. But I'm kind of done talking about Russia for the week.
Well,
I'd like to talk about our patrons.
Yeah, absolutely. Over at patreon.com/unfilter is a place to go. But by the way, we also have to head to the SAC.
Oh, hey, let me give a shout out to 5 new patrons this week. Xerox, Shane, Shagadility, Michael, and Xylite. You guys are our new patrons this week. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, you guys. And by the way, we hit an incredible plateau this week. As of today, we hit 600 patrons. So which is incredible. It's the highest number we've... Oh, whoa! Wow. That's right. 600 patrons. Thanks to all of you guys who support us from 2 all the way up to Club 33. And that's where I'm going to talk to right now, Club 33. It's time for the Would or Wouldn't Be SAC Edition. And first, Dirty writes and says, "Hey, Chase, I'm a new supporter and longtime listener. I spent almost a decade in the military, psychological operations, aka the propaganda machine. And now, and now I work in law enforcement. I just want to say thank you for being the voice of reason for so many years in my car stereo." And last but certainly not least, Michael C. writes and says, "Hey, gentlemen, the funding for the, quote, National Guideline Clearinghouse just dried up and no one seems to notice. As a man with a wife fighting breast cancer and a mother fighting liver cancer, the medical industrial complex is a frustration I deal with on a nearly daily basis. It seems to be the one area, our corrupt system, that Unfiltered pays little attention to. I would love some Chase and Chris insight once in a while. Just some feedback from a longtime listener. I still love the program. Keep up the great work, guys." Now, first off, Michael, I fully agree with you, and Chris can definitely chat on the topic of medical and healthcare, especially going back to the beginnings of the Affordable Care Act. On my personal perspective, it is awful. No one wants to fix it. Everybody wants to keep the pharmaceutical and the medical companies in back pockets, and it's just it's wrong. It's so wrong.
I hate to be Bernie Sanders too, but no, I don't. I also, it creeps me out that these things are for-profit institutions to begin with.
Yeah,
that's just a creepy thing if you think about it. Of course, I'm 7 months now with no health insurance because I just own my own business, and just financially it just didn't work out because of the cost of it, and it's kind of freaked me out a few times this year. I won't lie, and of course, my fiance is a diabetic, and she's also in the same situation. She owns her own business, and she's taken on new employees, and to be able to afford to pay them, she's dropped her health insurance. And as a diabetic, that's a very, very risky
dangerous
thing. So what she's been doing is seeing some folks in Canada, and it's just because she can buy insulin in Canada for $30, $60, something like that, depending on the amount she wants. And that same amount might be $800 in the States.
Well, I will say this,
same exact thing.
So as far as talking about it more on the show, Michael, obviously we're driven on what's currently happening, right? And so, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you want to talk to, it's been about Russia, and it's been about what the president's been doing. But that being said,
unfortunately, it'll probably happen when one of us ends up in a hospital, and that's when all of a sudden it'll come on the show. Because the reality is, otherwise, we're really kind of trying to appeal to the broadest amount while still getting in the stuff that we think that really matters. And so it's a really tight line what we do and don't include. And that's why, like, just for this week alone, and just about every week, I'm playing off a bunch of clips on the live stream that just didn't fit anywhere, don't fit in the overtime. I'm just playing them off on the live stream.
Yeah.
And I try to post that for public consumption on our Patreon, but it doesn't always get captured by YouTube because there's just so much stuff, and that's not even everything. So it is really tricky picking what goes in the show, and I really am sorry to hear about your situation, man.
Yeah, same here, man. No, it's definitely a broken system. It totally bites, but when those things do come to the forefront and we see it on the news, we'll probably definitely pick up on it because at that point, it's on our radar. Hey, remember, you guys can definitely support our show over at patreon.com/unfilter. Club 33, you guys rock. We're actually, right now, Chris, completely booked, but you can get on the waiting list. for Club 33. But hey, it doesn't matter. You can support us as little as $2 or more per month over at patreon.com/unfiltered. Thanks so much, you guys, for supporting the show.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, Chase?
Mommy needs a joint.
Yeah.
Mommy definitely needs a joint.
Yes.
And she's been down in Texas for a while. Now, the thing is there is a lot going on up in Canada when it comes to Mommy and her joints. And the problem is sometimes Mommy's got to cross the border, and then Mommy can't get back in the country.
Every day, around 400,000 Canadians cross the border into the United States. But some of those Canadians who have connections to the cannabis industry are running into problems. They're being denied entry. Tanya Fletcher has the story today.
Starting in April, I'm starting to see 1 or 2 cases a week.
This U.S. immigration lawyer is based in Blaine, Washington. These days, he's dealing with a whole new crop of clients, business travelers.
So these are professionals from Canada who either work for a company that does business with the U.S. cannabis industry or themselves individually, they're coming down to do business.
He's seeing many with even loose associations to marijuana now being turned away at the border.
You know, selling a machine, a legal machine from Canada to a U.S. customer, owning property in the United States that has a tenant who's in the cannabis industry. So it's a very far stretch, but they're making that connection and denying Canadians.
Wow.
He says there's been a lot of confusion because, yes, even though pot has already been legalized over there in Washington state and soon to be on this side here in Canada as well within a few months, the border between the two countries is still
By the way,
jurisdiction.
she is technically in the United States right now.
So it's interesting how deep their search goes and vetting. It really does demonstrate the breadth, if you will, of their vetting process.
Yes.
So the thing is Democrats might be seeing Russians going after guns. I don't know if that's the new meme. Is that there's a gun activist Russian that's in the miscellaneous folder, and that they're going to be pushing on sensitive political topics. But the one thing that the Democrats say the Russians haven't ruined yet is pot.
New York State's Department of Health is backing the legalization of recreational marijuana. In a 74-page report, the department said the positive effects outweigh the negatives. It now goes to Governor Andrew Cuomo for review and likely rejection. But recently, the Democrat, who is seeking re-election in November, signaled he is more open to legalizing marijuana. Cuomo has long been wary of efforts to legalize, calling marijuana a gateway drug as recently as last year.
But now that he's seen the financial incomes and positives that marijuana can bring to a state and county, he's decided... Oh, I'm just making that part up. Sorry.
So last week we played Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
Now you got another incumbent who's
Don't forget Boner
behind it.
Don't forget Boner. Yeah,
and Boner too. Yeah. And the thing is that that gateway drug thing is so easily destroyed these days.
Yeah.
You know, because people can just throw out, well, what about opioids? What about alcohol? You know, they'll just start throwing out stuff so fast that that thing just shatters. So that's like the last hold position. That's like the last logical fallacy. And then once you let that go, it's like, okay, let's make money.
Right.
And speaking of making money, there's a major alcohol maker who is in the business of growing things, thinking about getting into pot.
Big news tonight and a huge win for cannabis coming at you exclusively on Canadalia. The legal marijuana market has been booming in states where recreational use is allowed. It continues to grow in the U.S. In 2016. It generated over $7 billion in economic activity. But for a long time, one powerful industry has been very strongly opposed. But now those days could be over. And here with me tonight with a big announcement. He is a Texan, an avid hunter, and a wine connoisseur. He's the interim CEO of Wine and Spirits Wholesalers. Dawson Hobbs is here. So, Dawson, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Dawson. Freedom, freedom everywhere for all involved. What is your big announcement tonight?
We're making an announcement. The Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America are going to be encouraging Congress to give states the right to legalize cannabis so long as they enact appropriate regulations based on the alcohol model.
Okay, so what does this mean? Is this a sign that alcohol manufacturers, distillers, and brewers, are they going to get into the cannabis business?
No, what we're talking about is just...
We want them to pay us money. No, I'm just kidding.
I think they got a really good thing going here. So they don't have to get into selling pot directly. They can get into the store business. They can get into setting up, like, imagine... one day, if you could tour in a way like you tour a winery.
Yeah.
You might not get to walk around the plants, but you could maybe see them behind glass. mean, it could get really fancy here one day. In Seattle, there's a couple of experimental, super high-end Microsoft, billionaire-backed pot shops that are like luxury brand. Like your pot comes in a wood box, and it's been like stamped with like their custom stamp, and they have different pedigrees, and it's like the super fancy experience. So that way, if you have a family member who's a millionaire and you want to give them the first best pot experience of their life, you get them the super swanky gift set from the super swanky pot shop. And they're experimenting with different models. So you could see something, you could see something from the wine companies or even the cigarette companies. Philip Morris, one day, they supposedly own a bunch of land in California. They could convert that into growing. I mean, you could see big business snap into this in a couple of years.
Absolutely.
Once this settles. All right. Well, one last high note. This is a great one. A prankster hides marijuana in some city planters.
New this morning, a prankster growing marijuana plants in city-owned flower pots. This is in Wyoming. You can see the marijuana plants right there growing among the marigolds and the zinnias. Pretty big, too.
Oh, that's
Employees
brilliant.
weeding and watering the flowers first noticed a plot plant. This was last month. They then called police. Officers have since found 2 other plants growing. They say this isn't the first time that this has happened, but the marijuana plants went undetected, so they grew larger this time around.
Oh, my goodness.
Just takes one narc, dude. Just takes one narc, and then your good thing gets ruined,
Oh, that's hilarious. It's just like it's right under their notice, literally, yes. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
You did an excellent job, and I think this might be my last show from Texas for a while.
Really?
Yeah, I think I'm flying home this weekend, and so I think I'll be back in the studio, so you and I can be back in the studio together next weekend, so that should be good.
Yeah, man. So, hey, if people want to just follow your adventure down there and want to know... You like this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, if they want to know what's going on with Chris, so where can people go? Yeah.
Oh, you could go to @ChrisLAS. That's my personal tweeter. I also have like Insta Chris Lass on the Instagram. Never really mentioned that before. And then there is, of course, the network @Jupiter Signal. What about you, buddy?
Hey, people can follow me over on Twitter. I'm the real Nunes on Twitter @NUNES. Also, by the way, follow @GeekGamerTV. By the way, doing a lot of stuff with pinball. Got some big pinball things coming up down the road. I really would appreciate the follow on either place. So thanks so much, you guys. It's been an interesting week because people are still hating on Devin, so I get a lot of that heat.
Good, nice. I'm glad.
Yeah, man.
Kind of, in a way.
Yes. So, no, you guys, thank you so much for supporting the show and being there. To all our patrons at patreon.com/unfilter.
This morning, a prank.
Oh, wrong clip. I was trying to play the right playout music. But man, Chris, it'll be nice to have you back in the saddle next week. That's for sure, buddy.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, too.
And we will see you guys again next